Bliss came back, and I said "boo" really loud into the mic and scared the crap out of her.
Yay!
Okay, let's get to it. Hi, and welcome to Bliss Fully Aware, the show in which three opinionated people discuss what's going on currently in fandom and nerd culture. I am Bliss, and I'm joined by my dear friends, as always, Kelty and Kendra.
Yep.
That's us. We have so many cables on our bed right now.
Yes, we do.
Kinky! So, I know y'all are aware of what went on this week, but for the audience at home, for those blissfully unaware,
Right.
there was a
Drama that happened in the She-Ra fandom. It feels so weird saying She-Ra. It just doesn't feel like a word.
No.
It's not She-Ra, it's She-Ra.
She-Ra.
Like, put a W on the end of it.
that still feels wrong. Anyway, I mean, it's all a made-up language.
True.
All language is kind of made up if you think about it.
I think about it every day.
Oh.
I was an English major. It's kind of my thing.
Well, so anyway, the drama.
Yo, boy, the drama.
The drama. There sure was some.
It was pretty ridiculous.
It was a lot. I didn't find out about it until I saw somebody retweeting about it, because it's on Twitter. That's where all the fandom drama happens these days.
Well, yeah,
Almost exclusively.
none of us watch She-Ra.
Yeah, I think
so...
it's important to mention none of us are in the She-Ra fandom. None of us have watched the show. I mean, I guess we kind of know about Noelle Stevenson from, like, back in the day, but we have no personal connection to any of this drama.
No, none whatsoever.
It's true. It was bizarre. It was like watching a car crash.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like some old school mid-aughts, like, just flame war meltdown drama.
Yeah.
Like, it was ugly
But
and messy, and people were crying, and it was all over, like, people making a gay cartoon. It was so much energy over nothing.
Yep.
well, so the inciting incident was the writers and Noelle got together, and they were doing an Instagram live Q&A, is how I understood it was.
Okay, they were doing some
I
kind
thought
of...
it was some sort of stream.
It was some sort of, like, panel stream Zoom panel thing because, you know, of the quarantine and no one can get together and see anyone, so it was just a long, Q&A, fans were asking questions, and that's all I'm aware of.
I don't even think fans were asking questions. I think fans sent in emails and...
Oh yeah, they like ask questions electronically.
Yeah, it wasn't in real time.
It wasn't like a Zoom, like, real-time thing, is more what I meant.
5 million fans in one call. God.
All screaming and cutting out randomly.
So, there were some things apparently said in this little panel that were just the fucking end of the world.
Apparently.
I'm gonna pull up the old list of grievances.
List of demands.
There were multiple.
Yeah. Because, I don't know the order in which any of these things happened, like, who said what when, blah blah blah. There was a list of stuff that people didn't like.
I think it was only 3.
No, there were, from the one I'm looking at, there's, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess? One of them doesn't feel like a, legit grievance. The other ones I'm like, I guess.
Well, and if you like, maliciously misinterpret events for outrage points to have a grievance.
Yeah.
Really, there's only one that I give credit to, and that's only because I can't say it's not offensive because I don't belong in that group. And that was the supposed racist comment.
We'll get to that.
I'm just saying I can't say whether that's actually offensive or not because I am super white.
I am super white, and I'm still firmly on the not side.
Well,
like, I don't see
I
it.
don't think so, and I've talked to others who also don't think so, but, you know, personally, I can't take umbrage with that grievance.
I mean, as a Latina, I was not. I did not see the offense in it. But, I guess we all look at things differently. I didn't think it was offensive. We are skirting around what it is, though.
So, shall I talk about it, or do you want to
please.
as the host?
My co-host, my beautiful co-host.
Okay, so here is a list compiled by someone on Twitter of the grievances that the fandom had with what was said on this stream, Q&A, whatever it was. First of all, two characters that I don't know, Hordak and Entrapta. Someone, a fan, wrote an email saying that the fan has some form of disability, I don't know what, and this disabled fan saw these two characters, Hordak and Entrapta, as positive, good, disabled representation in media. I can't comment on whether they are, never seen the show, but just that one fan had the opinion that they felt somehow represented in these two characters in the form of their disability or their disability codedness or whatever. And that got turned into the writers claiming that they had good disabled representation on the show, specifically from these two characters.
Who are apparently villains.
Maybe.
They are villains. I do know that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think there might be a redemption arc for them in the last couple episodes, but I do know that they are villains.
Yeah, but we know that Puriteens don't believe in redemption arcs unless they end in death, and even then it has to be...
Or even just humanizing villains.
Yeah.
Like, villains that just aren't Ramsay Bolton psycho murderers, like villains that have
mustache-twirling psychos.
Some kind of humanization to them, even if they don't get redeemed. Okay, secondly, there's a character called Bo, and Bo is dark-skinned. It's a fantasy world.
In space.
In space. There's no, obviously, one-to-one racism like there is here on Earth, in our real hellscape world that we live in right now. But there is a character...
Yeah, they have green people and, like, a cat lady. And a woman with giant lobster hands.
I didn't know that. That's weird.
Okay, there's a character named Bo, and Bo is dark-skinned. And there is some sort of joke in the show where Bo has, like, a million brothers, or
siblings.
Many siblings, and they're all named some variation of Bo.
No, they rhyme.
No, that's what I mean. They're all some kind of rhyming word with Bo, and it has something to do with, like, their one personality trait. Like, that's the joke. Like, there's a guy named Oboe, and he plays the oboe, and that's the joke.
Well, and Bo, I found out because while reading through these lists of names, these joke names, I couldn't figure out why Bo was named Bo. He's an archer.
Oh, well, there you go. That's cute. So there you go. Bo is Bo the archer. Oboe plays the oboe. And they made a joke about one of Bo's possibly not even real brothers being named So, S-O-W, because he's a farmer, and he sows crops in a field, and that was the joke, and that got turned into Bo's brother So is a slave.
Yes.
And this is a pro-slavery stance that the writers of She-Ra are taking.
Apparently.
They are unmasking themselves as being all in favor of slavery and or sharecropping and or whatever, I don't know.
Space job he has.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like I can't tell anyone who is not white that that's not offensive, but I think it's a fucking stretch.
Yeah.
I am a little astounded, actually, that just the mere concept of a joke space farmer sowing fields while being dark-skinned at the same time was read as a pro-slavery joke is pretty far-reaching to me.
It did have that forced aspect to it. I don't know. Did you ever see the fan art? I guess it wasn't fan art, concept art.
Yeah.
That they sketched out.
He's got a straw hat and he's chewing on a blade of grass. Cute. And, like, the thing for me was that I had to have this explained to me. I had to have, like, the racism explained, I guess, because I could not understand. I had to go looking for the reasons people were offended by this. and I still think they're pretty fucking weak.
But the one I had the biggest grievance with, well, really, I had a major grievance with the disability thing too. But the one that just drove me the most up a wall was a man giving a shout out to a podcast run by his friends, called Desperate House Dykes, which was, it's run by lesbians.
And it is the correct title of the podcast.
And it's the title of the podcast.
They are lesbians, and they talk about desperate housewives, and the name of the podcast is Desperate House Dykes.
Is that what they talk about? Oh my god,
Yes.
I have to watch it now. That sounds awesome.
I looked it up because I wanted to know what the name of the podcast, like what this podcast was about.
Oh, that's funny.
That people were lampooning these poor writers over, and that's it. That's all it is.
I loved Desperate Housewives.
Well, and from my understanding, one of them, or maybe more than one of them, was helping moderate the stream. So it wasn't even just like I'm gonna tell you guys about a friend of mine. It was like, hey, thanks to my friends who are here, their podcast is this. Because you can't look up a podcast on half words. You have to have the name.
Also, D-word, I would have looked up Desperate House Dicks.
Yep.
Or I would have looked up Desperate House D-word.
Yeah.
Like, I would have typed that into Google.
The way my autism works, I would have just thought it was Desperate House D-word, and I would have typed that in. Autism aside, dick and dyke are part of my just everyday vernacular. I say them all the time, and I don't consider them bad words that need to be censored around anyone under the age of 11, maybe?
Yeah, so that was the issue. They said that this straight man had said a slur against queer women, and that was unforgivable. Death to him, pitchforks and torches, blah, blah, blah.
Because he shouldn't have said it. He shouldn't have said the D word, endless air quotes, because he's a straight man. So really, he just shouldn't have, supported this podcast run by queer women, because it was more offensive for him to show support.
He has no way of accurately plugging or supporting this work done by queer women, because these queer women who have agency and are adults have decided to title their podcast Desperate House Dykes. And now, unless, I guess, you are also a queer woman, you are just not allowed to know it exists.
No, you actually, I have talked to people, you have to be a lesbian. Bisexuals cannot say the word.
Oh yeah,
dyke.
well, that's another fight, amongst queer women. Only lesbians get to say dyke.
Which,
and,
I'm gonna be 100% honest.
It's just gold star radfem bullshit all over again.
Of course it is. But I'm gonna be 100% honest. That is my label that I use. I am a dyke. That's what I like. The word lesbian is fine, the word gay is fine, queer is fine, but my favorite word, and the word that I use most, is dyke. And my non-queer friends even will use that word to describe me, because that's how I prefer to be described. And if you don't like that word, that is 100% fine. I'm not asking you to, but I am asking you to mind your damn business. I want people to call me a dyke. Not meanly, and their context is everything, but I think that context is important in these sorts of arguments. Another thing I saw recently on Twitter, people who were like, don't have a slur in your @ even if it's yours to reclaim. Which is literally taking away someone's agency because it makes you uncomfortable, which is something that psycho-Christians do. Anyway, I had a lot to get off my chest about that, but, yeah.
Oh, you've been stewing in it since this whole drama started.
Yeah, dyke is my favorite word. I love that word. It's mine. And you can't tell people that they're not allowed to say it unless they're a gay woman. And if people who I love and trust can't call me by the titles that I choose, that's taking away my agency.
What is the point of any of this reclamation?
Exactly!
If not to eventually have these words be neutered and be harmless. I don't understand what is the point of reclaiming anything.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can't reclaim something if you're only allowed to say it under certain circumstances because it might trigger people. But another thing is, I don't like the idea of dyke being considered a new N-word, I guess.
It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Not again.
Because it spent most of its time being reclaimed, first of all. And secondly...
Just, is a word in Dutch.
And secondly, as I was going to say, is just a word. Not even just in Dutch. It's a word. There are dikes. You use dikes to fucking... What is it? Like, water...
No, a dike is like a small dam.
Okay, there you go. It's like a small dam. And, like, I'm never gonna forget running around and, like, seeing on Twitter somebody refer to Dick Van Diesler, and it took me, like, 15 minutes, and I loved the Dick Van Dyke Show, and it took me 15 minutes to understand what they were saying. It's a name. People, you gotta understand context. It's really important to understand context, because you can't just make context.
Well, that's the thing.
You can't shape it to your meaning.
Rather than, like, have the knowledge that there are these words that have been used in harmful contexts, and that we should be mindful, and especially in these words are used against marginalized groups, we shouldn't dictate to those marginalized groups how to deal with those words. Conversely, you cannot just take the word a priori of no context and then invent context around it so that it is always offensive. Because that's simply not how language works.
No.
And you are then just deciding that the word, this groupage of sounds, is always bad, no matter who is saying it. And yeah, like Kelty was saying, they've constructed this like double bind where the only correct way to deal with or reclaim a slur is you have to be of the marginalized group that it refers to, so dyke, but also not want to say it.
Yeah.
You have to be in the position of being able to reclaim it, but you have to have the moral fortitude to not want to.
Yeah.
Which is a very Protestant Christian double bind kind of conception of sin, where the purpose of sin is to tempt you, but you must resist. Like,
yeah.
It's the same sort of ideology, and it's just so painfully obvious to me how many of these young queer kids were raised Protestant, even if they didn't go to church, in the very Protestant culture of America, with this sort of noble resistance to indulgence that is so just encapsulated in all of American ideology, and it's what makes them so infuriating.
Okay. Anyway, I'm done. I'm fine.
Anyway, Kendra, what was the other one on the list? There was one more?
Yeah, so the final item on the list is the one I get the least, because I literally have no idea what people are mad about. So I'm just gonna talk about what other people are claiming. So there's a character named Double Trouble, as far as I'm aware. And Double Trouble is like a non-binary character and also a shapeshifter, I believe. Yes?
Sounds legit.
So, someone, I don't know who, one of the writers, talked about this character, Double Trouble, mimicking people's personalities and mannerisms through shapeshifting and through...
People watching.
People watching, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that one.
That's kind of how they operate, and made a comment, some sort of comment about how they might sit in a cafe and watch a group of kids to, like, understand how children act.
Mm-hmm.
And that got turned into this non-binary character is a child predator. And the writers are saying that. And that's bad because it's reinforcing the stereotype that queer people are child predators.
Which is something I tried to explain to more than one person in my foray into this drama.
Yeah.
I tried to explain that there is a history of the misconception or the fear that queer people are all child molesters.
Just by virtue of existing around children.
And I genuinely, that was another one where I had to get in there and be like, please tell me what you're seeing that I'm not seeing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to know what these people are thinking, that just by a character who is a shapeshifter, observing the mannerisms of children to more accurately shapeshift is the same as child predation. And that speaks way more to the just general state of, like, homophobia, queerphobia, and general, like, sex negativity in America than I think it does to the idea that a shape-shifting character might observe people to better mimic their mannerisms, and they're just, yeah.
Which, again, speaking as an autistic, that's just something that we do. I do a lot of people watching and movie watching and TV. That's just how I learned. That's how I learned to, like, talk as normally as possible. And
I think a really good example of Double Trouble. That's such a... Okay. I won't get into my analysis of the names of this show.
I don't care about any of that.
In the... I want to say it was 2011 play with Johnny Lee Miller and Benedict Cumberbatch. They played Frankenstein. And they'd switch the roles each night. And I was watching an interview about the way that they decided to perform Frankenstein. Like, how they chose their own mannerisms. Because I watched both performances. It's very good. They play their characters differently. But it's the exact same story, exact same costumes, everybody else is the same. So it's really neat. So Johnny Lee Miller said that he watched his son a lot because he imagined Frankenstein being born into the world having to learn the way a child does.
Excuse me, Bliss. Do you mean Frankenstein's monster?
Yeah.
Frankenstein, I'll have you know, is the name of the doctor. Dr. Victor Frankenstein.
We're getting divorced.
Oh, God. So yeah, Johnny Lee Miller watched his son to decide how to play his role of Frankenstein's monster.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Bliss.
you. Some goddamn respect for the source material here.
And then I believe Benedict went and observed a unit for traumatic brain injury patients and was able to watch how they were behaving and, you know, getting on day-to-day for his mannerisms. Do I think that either of those things are predatory behavior for the sake of being able to act a certain way? No. No, I don't.
That makes me wonder if other people did, though. I bet
I don't know
they
if
did.
that was quite the issue at the day.
Yeah, that's true. But I have so little faith anymore.
Yeah, no, I found that completely ridiculous. That one felt the most forced to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
by a mile.
I don't know, I feel like the Dyke thing was super forced, too. So, I feel like
But I mean, at least with the guy saying dyke, that happened. A man
okay, I
man
get what you
said
mean.
the word dyke. We can all agree that that fact happened.
Yeah, okay.
But this
fair.
one, nothing
Close.
even happened. It was just the implication that a non-binary character saw a child and, like, on purpose observed them to make, or even hypothetically, because I don't think this even happened in the context of the show. This was just the writers talking about something hypothetical happening. This non-binary character hypothetically observing a child in order to better shapeshift into a child. Should that ever be required of them. So yeah, at least, like, this is the biggest stretch for me because it literally didn't happen.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's just people drawing very awful predatory conclusions about this very innocent, sort of cute thought.
Yep, that sounds about right for fandom these days.
I don't know, that one sounds about right for fandom in general.
Yeah. Oh my god, no. Did you see the tweet? That was like, for normal fandoms, sure, people are always looking for things to be upset about, but this fandom is different.
The whole thing was just a whole lot of messy.
Oh my god. I never had seen one in the wild, you know? The concept of I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom. I'd never seen that actually enacted in reality before until that moment where I was just like, oh wow. Do you think that with your whole brain? Like, you typed it out. It'd be one thing.
And meant it.
It'd be one thing if you were like drunk at a party and just like blurted it out and said like, oh, it's not a regular fandom, it's a cool fandom. I can't believe there is somebody in the year 2020 that thinks that their fandom is special in some way.
Honestly, that's a thing that most young fans do in fandoms. I'm sure you don't see it or engage with it a lot, but as someone who is in fandoms that have large, younger fan bases, most of them think that their fandom is the exception to the rule. You see it a lot in Sandersides, because Sandersides, as much as I love Sandersides, and the fandom is precious sometimes, it is a lot of I am woker than thou bullshit sometimes.
It's a lot of, like, social posturing of who can be the most woke, because wokeness is now, like, the new social currency.
Yeah.
And that would be great if that meant, like, actual progressive behavior, but it doesn't. It just means, like we said with Dyke, just inventing context for outrage.
Mm-hmm.
One day we're gonna have to get into the event that was the Super Hulak War.
Oh, I don't want to.
That will be fun. No, that'll be fun because it's like it's so in the past that it's like a cute historical artifact now,
Yeah.
and not anything to do with the real hell pain of being alive in 2020. Like, okay, so here's an example. I know I always bring everything back to Game of Thrones, but this is actually relevant.
Yeah.
So in well, I don't even remember which season it was, season 7 or season 8, because it's such a blur of mediocrity and failure. But there's a scene where Ed Sheeran is in a scene of Game of Thrones, and he's just some random soldier at a little campfire. He's playing his lute.
He's singing a little song.
Harp or whatever it is, and he's singing a little song to entertain his fellow soldiers.
Which is a thing that happened all the time.
Which is a thing that in medieval societies they did because they did not have Twitter.
Exactly.
And it was fine, man. Like, I don't like Ed Sheeran. I'm not a fan of his music. But I really did not give a single fuck that he was in the scene of Game of Thrones for 10 seconds. And everyone got so mad about it that he deleted his Twitter and shit because everyone was so mad that he was in their dragon show.
Yeah, the thing that I always remember is on Cracked they used to talk about Game of Thrones back in the day, and it was like season 6 or 7 then, because that's when they were doing
Winter is taking forever.
Yeah. Dan O'Brien just goes, that's fun for people who like him, and I was like, yeah, that's more or less how I feel too, and then it was just like, but no, everybody just decided to attack Ed Sheeran for having a favorite show, and then being like, hey, can I be on your show? And they were like, totally! And that was apparently his fault, and the worst thing anyone could ever do. Which, meanwhile, he's not the only one who did it. He just was the only one who did it whose face you recognize.
Yeah, this is not the first time someone has, like, appeared in a background scene of Game of Thrones or whatever.
The drummer of Coldplay was in the most famous episode of Game of Thrones, doing what he was famous for, and no one noticed. No one cared.
He's famous for juggling, right? He played, like, some sort of juggler.
No, that was a different one! That was a different one!
Being a dick.
That was Sugar Rose.
No, I didn't know that somebody else did it, but I was just being a dick.
Okay. But, like,
Yeah. They do that all the time because it's fun for fans of that thing to be like, hey, cool. Because that's nice and harmless.
Do you know what else is nice and harmless? Ads!
Phantom.
What were we talking about?
Puriteens.
Ah, yes. Okay. Well, just so that we're all on the same page, Kendra, would you mind explaining what a Puriteen is?
Largely, I guess we and like other fandom people use the term Puriteen to refer to usually teenagers and very young adults who engage with fandom, but have this very puritanical, prescriptive ideology about how media and narrative should be consumed, and attach like a moral component to how one interacts with the fiction they consume. And they must consume fiction that aligns with their puritanical moral ideology, or else they are problematic. Problematic here not meaning what it means in like critical theory, but just being like a substitute for wrong, because they know that wrong is like a limiting moral judgment, but that's what they want to say. So they just substitute the word problematic to mean wrong. And yeah, that if you enjoy, or not even enjoy, but if you partake in media that has, you know, maybe violence, or maybe depicts an abusive relationship, or anything that is not good and puritanical, then you are problematic. You are bad for watching it, because the depiction of something in media, they believe, equates, whether you want it to or not, equates to a promotion of that content or that subject matter, and a sort of tacit approval of that sort of behavior. And there's no room for nuance, and there's no room for engaging with difficult subject matter, because why would you want to? That just means that you're bad and you're problematic. That's all it is. Like, really, it's just this attitude that has been developing amongst younger people, I'm gonna say in their late teens, early 20s, like very young adults, who ascribe this sort of puritanical moral virtue to like the consumption of media, the consumption of narratives, and also like proselytize this ideology, like go around enforcing it on other people as a form of like social control.
A lot of it, maybe not all of it, is because they don't actually know the history of the things that they're trying to cancel. I guess is the way I want to say it. When Puriteens come up with these claims, like we see in this She-Ra drama, with the claims of like pedophilia or predatorial behavior, those are all things that decades and decades and decades ago were these stereotypes used against queer people, and why queer people couldn't have rights because they were, you know, out there to prey on your children.
Yeah. It's
because even before that, queer people were lumped in with the negative idea that queerness was the same as like bestiality and incest and those things. It's all lumped together. So them trying to detract every single negative, big air quotes, thing is just, I feel personally, reinforcing that narrative that queer people should be associated with bad.
Well, yeah, you're just couching basically to like the demands of the oppressor, that in order for your queerness to be palatable, it must be like married monogamous heterosexuality.
Mm-hmm. It's like the Satanic Panic all over again.
It's a lot like the Satanic Panic. It's honestly, I believe, like a form of moral panic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in a very small bullshit scale, because it's just children on Twitter.
What I also find interesting about it is that they never provide actual ways of solving the problem. Like, especially with the She-Ra drama, I saw a lot. People were like, well, how would you have preferred this straight man refer to this podcast?
Yeah.
Because as a podcast with that in its title, you can't just say D words or bleep it out because that's part of the title that people need to search. And countless people were responding with, I don't know, but he just shouldn't have said it. So, like, to other people, that's not good enough.
Yeah, because other people were saying, well, you know, those women don't speak for all lesbians, or whatever.
Because I said multiple times is also when people would respond, well, he should have gotten permission. I was like, well, as a dyke, it doesn't bother me. Then people would be like, that doesn't mean that other people can't be upset. And it was like, well, okay, but like, I am part of this community.
Yeah, so what is the solution then? Well, is the solution that it's literally just unmentionable unless you are a lesbian woman?
Well, and that's the thing. It's always just, I don't know, but you can't do it.
It's because they've become so and so insular that they're not learning anything. So they're just rolling around in this pit of filth that they claim is moral superiority.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, I keep telling people that isn't my experience. And just by saying that isn't my experience, people take umbrage with just that. And will say, well, your experience isn't universal, so stop telling people how to feel. Which isn't what I'm doing, but it sure as hell is what you're doing.
It's like an incredible self-own, because that's exactly their whole ideology, is to police what marginalized groups are and are not allowed to say about themselves.
And it's like, well, okay, that's not...
Then what are we doing here? What are you mad about?
You're upset about something that I have no control over. And if it's upsetting to you that I ship the main characters in Killing Stalking, or whatever the fuck I'm doing in that moment, refer to myself as a dyke, that has nothing to do with me. You don't have to talk to me. And like, well, here's the thing. You can intentionally hurt someone's feelings, and then that matters.
That's a very different circumstance.
But
yes.
That's specific.
No, like, they're not an equal amount of harm.
Exactly. And other people doing something in their own corner, referring to themselves by their own slurs,
quote unquote,
shipping something that you find problematic, quote unquote, those things are not about me. You can feel those things. I'm not telling you that you can't, but you also can't tell me that I can't do it because it hurts you.
It's also just, frankly, not my job.
Exactly. I don't have any control over how you feel. If I'm intentionally hurting your feelings, then yes, it's absolutely my responsibility to apologize. But if I'm just living my own damn life and you're upset by that, I'm sorry, I don't care.
Like I said this, like, privately amongst ourselves a while ago. There is a big argument right now, there is a big hot take, TMCR, that intent is not relevant when discussing harm that something has caused. Like, someone's intention to be homophobic or racist or whatever doesn't actually matter when discussing the harm they've caused. And I understand, to a degree, the logic behind that, and I just have to say that personally, for myself, intent very much does matter to me. If someone is being homophobic or misogynist or whatever, if that person does not intend to be homophobic or misogynistic, that has an effect on my material safety around that person. Yes, if you are just a buffoon and you just don't know better about, that behavior being misogynistic or that statement being homophobic, that has a huge difference to me on how safe I feel around you and whether or not I need to take steps to protect myself. I think it is very much the same in these spaces that people have just sort of latched onto this idea that intent doesn't matter ever
Yeah.
and expanded it to include all these things that it was never meant to include.
It's very different, and I think there's a huge, safety being the most important thing, but there's an opportunity to help people who don't know better educate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
What frustrates me a lot is the just absolute unwillingness to listen to anything outside of their own point of view.
Yeah.
It feels like a foot-stomping, angry toddler screaming that they're right. And I will sit down and have a conversation with you about why you think this is wrong. But you cannot just throw a fit and say, I'm wrong for disagreeing with you.
Well, because then you're no different than conservatives. You're no
They're
different.
all conservatives, they just aren't willing to admit it.
Exactly. But that's what I mean. Like,
They're homo nationalists!
Please get into homo nationalism.
Can I?
Yeah.
Homo nationalism. So yeah, it's a term coined by Jasbir Kapur, who is a queer theorist, and talks about how, in America particularly, but, I guess in the West, you could say, the nationalist ideology utilizes queer people and their rights to reinforce itself. So, a way you could understand this is to look at gay marriage, I guess, in the West, where it has become largely legal, in a way that it is just like heterosexual marriage. So it is monogamous, for the purposes of taxation and census data collecting and all that. Queer relationships have just kind of been boiled down to this idea of gay marriage in a way that reinforces state control of people's relationships and of people's families and, the way that they create and structure their families. That's an example, that's a very abbreviated definition of homo nationalism. And yeah, that's basically what I see informing a lot of this ideology amongst these young kids, in fandom on Twitter and all that, is this idea that they think because they are queer, that every instinctual impulse they have is somehow radical, or is somehow transgressive, or is a real fuck the system sort of thought, when in fact a lot of their ideology is straight up, from the social purity movement of the 1920s, or from the Victorian era of 100 years ago or more. It is this very, very old, prescriptive ideology of how people should act and how morality is conferred upon a society. Yeah, so that is, I see a lot of, homo nationalist adjacent thoughts and concepts being thrown around quote-unquote radical or progressive spaces. It's upsetting because they believe themselves to be so utterly progressive and radical, you will never convince them that they are anything but. It's a losing battle.
How much of it do you think depends on their age?
I honestly don't know. I would amend that to be like I said, young adult, older teenager, young adult. I think, and this is just 100% my theory, I have no actual data to back this up, but it would seem to me that people of that age in America and the West have grown up in a society that largely, not totally, but largely has a more supportive view of queerness. In my country, for example, gay marriage has been legal since 2005, and in a lot of Europe as well, and in the States, a lot of states had it before it was federally ratified and all that. And, there were gay characters on TV and in movies, and everyone kind of had a gay person that they knew in their life.
I think it's mostly based on how much experience you have in the real world. And I'm not saying that these kids aren't dealing with trauma or, don't have history with trauma or anything like that. What I am saying is you can't know how the world works just by being online.
Well, and I think that these kids also have no idea how dangerous openly being queer was even 10 years ago.
Exactly.
Or even 20 years ago.
Or even just in other places today.
Just even in countries that are not America. Yeah.
I mean, hell, even parts of America. Like, you don't really see a lot of aunties from, like, Arkansas. 'Cause, like, you can't be gay there. They'll fucking try and kill you. And, like, again, yeah, like, Texas, mostly the Texan Puriteens are, like, in Houston and Austin.
The privileged cities.
Yeah, where it's, like, cool and fun, and, like, not Elgin, which is just 30 minutes outside of Austin, and you get fucking chased by guys in pickup trucks. So, like...
Oh, or down in Buda, where people, like, beat you in the parking lot.
Exactly. Like, there's a certain amount of experience, like, negative experience, that you have to have in order to understand what it means to be oppressed, I think. It's a little wild that they don't seem to get what they're saying to people when they say this sort of stuff.
Very wild. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around it sometimes.
Exactly.
And I mean, I get it. If you're young, it's hard. Life is hard. And you don't know everything yet. And you haven't been taught the history you should. Most queer children don't know anything about queer history.
No.
And I mean, that is just my biggest pet peeve on the internet these days.
As a student of history, as a literal history graduate now, it is the most goddamn irritating thing in the world that people don't know history, and that marginalized history is not taught to anyone, but also that people just don't go look for it themselves.
That's a big deal for me, because we have the Library of Alexandria in our pockets now. So really there's not an excuse.
Like, the fact that you're just not, like, hungry for this knowledge is the thing I don't get.
It is infuriating. I openly welcome any Puritan out there who wants to have an actual conversation. Not just a shouting match, because I'm not engaging in that. But an actual conversation about queer history and maybe why they might be wrong about things. Come, hit me up on @BlissfullyShow on Instagram and Twitter. I will have a conversation with you. But I think all of it is to say that what happened in the She-Ra fandom was, while comical to witness from the outside, indicative of what is happening in younger culture these days with this Puritan movement. And it's sad.
It's really scary.
Sad, and I feel bad because She-Ra's one of those fandoms that was pretty okay. It was a nice, fluffy show for people to watch, and it had representation that mattered to people, and it was meaningful to a lot of people. And blowing up all of these accusations against the staff that genuinely none of them, I feel, personally, were valid. But that's my opinion. I felt bad for the fans that liked the show and then felt like they were wrong for liking it, or they'd been betrayed because this person said that this thing is now wrong. And it's sad. And I hope that it is a passing bad. I don't think it is. But I can hope.
I mean, I hope so, because I feel like most kids, like, the reason that we call them Puriteens is because it's often grown out of.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm remembering the don't read tag. That threw me down a trip down memory lane.
Yeah, it's having a resurgence because people keep sticking their noses in shit that it doesn't belong in.
Yeah, now it's just dead dove, do not eat.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's just been couched in a cooler, more updated reference.
Mm-hmm. I think that was the biggest shift generationally on the internet, where it went from don't like, don't read to I don't like it, so it shouldn't exist.
So did we talk about the thing?
You tell us.
You're the one in charge. You are the
I'm
host.
the one in charge. That's a novel idea. I think we talked about the thing. I think we could talk about Puriteens until we're all blue in the face, but...
That's true. We can have a two-parter this time.
No, I think we need a new goddamn topic next time.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on Bliss Fully Aware. If you want, you can come find us online, Instagram and Twitter, at Blissfully Show. And until next time, don't shame people on the internet! Bye! I'm sorry, Nancy Reagan, but I don't want to think about the children. I'm sorry, Nancy Reagan, but I don't want to think about the children.